Now picture this. You're on a margarita date in Mexico City. You got your permanent residency last year. You've been here for 6 months. The bill comes and it says, yeah, that face that you just made, that's the face that I'm thinking of. That's every American who moves down here every time a bill shows up for at least the first 6 months straight. Your brain hasn't quite caught up yet that you've relocated. Because that symbol actually means pesos, so you're fine. It's $25. Cocktail hour can resume. But once your heart rate comes back down, you start to wonder, why is it the same symbol? Two different currencies, two different countries, but the same dollar sign, as we'd call it, on every menu and every receipt. The answer is actually older than the United States and even older than Mexico as we know it. And there's even a Latin phrase stamped on the coin where this whole story started that I think about every expat should hear. It's plus ultra. And we'll find out what that means here in a minute. Now, I asked a few digital nomads and permanent residency holders that I know down here whether the conversion math ever stops, whether they stop having that little moment of panic sometimes when you see something that you're going to buy. And the consensus is you get a little bit faster at reminding yourself that it is pesos and not dollars, but it never quite stops. It's one of those adjustments that nobody warns you about before you move abroad. Different outlets for your plugs, perhaps in Europe, different types of milk, a different rhythm to your day. And this one, the dollar sign that isn't a dollar sign. Now, the US dollar and the Canadian dollar are both called dollars, but they're worth different amounts. Mexico calls its currency the peso, but writes it with the exact same symbol as the US dollar. The whole continent runs on a shared vocabulary that quietly means different things, and once you live between two of these countries, you start to notice it everywhere. So, where did the dollar sign actually come from? Because neither country invented it, not the United States, not Mexico. The symbol is older than both. The story starts in Spain in the 1500s and a coin that you've probably heard of called the piece of 8, or the real de ocho, a silver coin worth 8 reales. And Spain minted them by the wagon loads from the silver mines of Mexico and Bolivia. Mexico produced over 3 billion of them across the 3 centuries they were in production. They were so trusted, so universally accepted, that the piece of 8 became the world's first global reserve currency, legal tender from Boston to Beijing. Mexican silver pesos were still accepted in the United States until 1857 and in China until 1935. That's right, the Chinese economy running partly on Mexican silver coins as recently as 90 years ago. But still, where did the symbol come from? Now, historians have argued about this for 2 centuries, and there are 2 prevailing theories that are worth knowing. The most widely accepted one is also kind of the most boring. Merchants and scribes abbreviated pesos as a P, a capital P with a small s. And in the rush of writing that abbreviation 100 times a day in a trade ledger, the S drifted into the P overall. The curve of the P kind of falls away and you're left with an S and a vertical stroke, a dollar sign. There's a 1778 invoice from Oliver Pollock, a financier of the American Revolution, where you can watch the P and the S collide on the page in real time. So, is it just bad handwriting that happened to make history? Because the other theory is the one that I love the most because of where it lands. If you look at the Spanish coat of arms, there's 2 pillars, the Pillars of Hercules, flanking the Strait of Gibraltar at the edge of what was the known world at the time. Wrapped around these pillars is a banner. And on that banner, there are 2 words, plus ultra. Not Spanish, but Latin, the prestige language of empire. The theory here is that the dollar sign isn't a P and an S at all. It's the pillar and the ribbon. The column is the bar and the S is the banner wrapping around it. Now, plus ultra means to go beyond. That wasn't on the coins by accident, and it sure describes the adventure of finding new places to call home. Now, the old warning at the Pillars of Hercules, at the edge of the world that the Greeks knew, had been non plus ultra, nothing farther beyond, aka don't sail past this point. Now, after the discovery of the Americas, Charles V of Spain flipped the warning into a dare, struck out the non and left plus ultra, go farther beyond. He put it on his coat of arms, on his palace, and on his empire's coins. And these coins traveled farther than the empire that minted them ever could have imagined. So when the founders designed the American currency in the 1790s, they didn't reinvent the wheel. They had a working coin all over the colonies, the Spanish dollar, and they used it as the model. The 1792 Coinage Act set the US dollar's average weight by averaging the content of worn Mexican pesos. The founders weighing beat-up Mexican coins on a scale to figure out how much silver to put in the American one. The US dollar didn't particularly replace the peso. For a long time, it was just a peso with a different name on it. And that's how both countries ended up with the same symbol, the same source, and essentially the same coin. And here's where Mexico's national pride comes through. When Spanish colonies started gaining independence in the 1800s, most of them rebranded. Peru's currency became the sol, Venezuela's became the bolivar, Ecuador had the sucre, El Salvador and Costa Rica both chose the colon, Panama chose the balboa, Honduras chose the lempira, Guatemala the quetzal, and Nicaragua the cordoba, and Bolivia rounded them out with the boliviano. Half the continent walked away from the word peso the moment that they had a chance, but Mexico kept it. By the 1800s, the Mexican peso was the most trusted silver coin on earth. So trusted that when Mexico tried to redesign it in 1872, merchants across China and East Asia rejected the new coin outright. Mexico had to revert to the old cap and ray design and keep minting it until 1897 just to maintain trade with Asia, a country that couldn't update its own money because the rest of the world refused to accept anything but the trusted original. So, when you sit down for that margarita and your eye trips on the dollar sign, that symbol has been a peso sign for longer than it's been a dollar sign. Mexico owns it in a way that the United States never quite has. But we share the symbol, we share the history, but even all of that is older than either one of them. The world we're living in right now is uncertain in ways that most of us weren't planning for. And currency is one of them. Currencies wobble, policies shift. Reserve currencies have a shelf life. The Spanish dollar had its turn. The British pound had its turn. The US dollar is currently having its turn, and history says that all turns end. The expats that I know who sleep best at night aren't betting everything on one system. They're spread across countries, currencies, and passports on purpose. Plus Ultra was good advice 500 years ago. It's good advice now. Nobody warns you about this part of living abroad. The cocktail hour moments where the bill makes you panic and then makes you a bit curious. The small things that you start to learn because you live somewhere else and the culture asks you to. They become the texture of your new life. You move for the residency, maybe the cost of living, the weather, or the distance from whatever you wanted distance from, and you stayed for the joy of noticing things that you'd never have noticed at home. And if you're considering making the move yourself, sitting on a remote work setup, wondering whether a digital nomad visa or a permanent residency is, or something farther beyond makes sense for you, we built the world's largest digital nomad visa guide, 68 countries, including Mexico. The link for that is in the description. The right information makes it all possible. I'm Brad with Evolution Expats. I'll see you in our next video.